You're listening to Let's Get It On with Big John McCarthy and Sean Wheelock.
Big John McCarthy has witnessed the best that the UFC had to offer.
That is it! Game, set, match! We have a new champion!
Your backstage pass to the world of mixed martial arts and combat sports. Only on the Ignotainment Media Network.
Let's get it on!
Hey everyone, welcome to Let's Get It On with Big John McCarthy and me, Sean Wheelock. Every week on this podcast, John and I give you an inside look at MMA and combat sports, always separating fact from fiction. On this week's program, we'll discuss the controversy and social media firestorm generated by Big John's comments from last week's episode of Let's Get It On in regards to the 5-year suspension and $165,000 fine issued to Nick Diaz by the Nevada State Athletic Commission. Big John and I will also examine the announcement made during last Saturday's Bellator Dynamite that both Fedor Emelianenko and former Pride FC president Nobuyuki Sakakibara will be returning to MMA with a new Japanese promotion launching on New Year's Eve. And we'll be speaking with Bobby Gunn, previously one of boxing's top cruiserweights, who's now at the forefront of the bare-knuckle boxing resurgence. Plus, as we do on every episode of Let's Get It On, John will answer your questions. Submit them via email, info@letsgetitonpodcast.com, and on Twitter by using the hashtag AskBJM. Remember that you can download and subscribe to our podcast on the iTunes Store. For Android, download the Stitcher app and subscribe. And you can go straight to our website, letsgetitonpodcast.com. Well, last week here on Let's Get It On, John and I spoke extensively about the 5-year suspension and $165,000 fine issued to Nick Diaz by the Nevada State Athletic Commission for his third career positive marijuana test in the state. And just like that, this highly controversial and contentious topic grew even more explosive as, John, your comments were picked up by numerous websites, including MMAmania.com, BJPenn.com, and LowKickMMA.com, as well as across social media and online MMA forums. John, I'll be honest with you, brother. I did not see this coming, but suddenly you became part of this story.
I know, it's ridiculous. It's, you know, the ridiculous part is they sit there and they do exactly what media does, is they pick up one little blurb and, oh, John McCarthy says Nick Diaz is a liar. Why don't you get a fucking clue? Why don't you listen to the whole thing? Okay, what I'm saying is Nick Diaz is not being honest on the form, and that is making him look bad when he can be honest. To be honest, say what you're doing. Yeah, this whole thing has been, is ridiculous. I've said from the start, I don't think the 5 years is, a good, punishment. I think it's ridiculous. But that's not, it's not up to me. If I could change it for Nick, I would change it for Nick. But Nick needs to be smart about what he's going to do from, this point on in his career as far as answering or actually applying for that license. He's got to be honest on it. He's got to put things, down that he's doing, and let the chips fall where if they're if they're not going to license him, fine, don't fight there. It's okay, but you're better off being truthful with yourself and being truthful with other people than trying to hide it. When you hide it, when they catch it, they're going to go after you.
See, John, one of the great things about us having our own program is that you can set the record straight. Things get pulled out of context all the time. There are blurbs, there are clips, things get written up, but we have this platform. And I think if anybody goes back and they listen to the archives, you can get it on our website, letsgetitonpodcast.com. There's the entire show free of charge. You hear the full structure of what you said, and it's very different from those excerpts that were being reported. The excerpts were correct. They had the right quote. It was just taken out of context of your larger statement.
Yeah, and wow, surprising. The MMA media does that. Shocked me. It's like, really? And then you get everyone saying, oh, I can't believe you said it. It's like, dude, did you listen to it? Oh, no, I read it on MMA Mania. They said, yeah, well, you're an idiot. If you're just going to sit there and just believe what the media says, then you're not being too bright. You need to understand everything in the context it's put out. And, look at it. Again, I think Nick Diaz is a phenomenal fighter. I think he's a good person. I have, one of the funniest things I ever had is my son who judges MMA. He was at one point it was Strikeforce long ago. Now Nick was fighting in Strikeforce, so he wasn't fighting in Nevada. He was fighting in California. And if you don't think Nick was doing the same thing then, he was. It's just California looks at it in a different way. But my son was, he says, I just don't like Nick's attitude. I said, Nick is an awesome guy. I go, you would love him. And it just so happens we're down and by the cage, and in comes Gilbert Melendez and Jake Shields, and in comes Nick Diaz. And Nick, hey John, hey, how's it going, Nick? And he comes over and he shakes my hand and how you doing? And talk to him. And all of a sudden he's, I said, this is my son Ron, and he says, hey, how you doing? And they're talking for like 5 to 10 minutes until someone in the back finally comes, Nick, you got to get in here. He's, oh, I got to go. See you later. And my son turns around and goes, he's the nicest guy. And it's like, no kidding. This is not about Nick and who Nick is as a person. I like the fact that Nick is as real as he is. I like the fact that he doesn't, put on a front for other people. He's going to, you get what you get. But I do think that he's getting bad information from people involved with him about, getting licensed in states and what he's doing. He's just got to be smart about it, and don't sit there. And if you take something, put it down. Don't just say, oh, I didn't realize I had to put it down. Do the right things, and the right things is going to end up protecting you in the end. It's not going to end up being able to bite you. It will protect you.
John, I don't know how your wife Elaine took this, but my wife Kelly, who thinks the world of you, took this hard. It was like I was being criticized. She was really upset, and I was thinking back all the time we've spent together out in public.
No, you know what? My wife is used to.
But John, I think you're the most popular person in MMA, and I've seen that again. All the dinners we've been and sitting at bars and in hotel lobbies and hanging out, people love you. I've never seen you take heat on anything before.
Oh hell, I take heat all the time, and it's fine. It's no big thing. Look at there's people that don't look at the big picture. They look at Nick Diaz and the situation with the athletic commission, and they think that's unfair. And as soon as they think it's unfair, they're gonna side, a certain way and say that's just crazy. 5 years, that's ridiculous. They don't give that for PEDs. They don't do this. They don't do that. You can't compare apples to lemons. There's different things that go on, and when you look at, I'm the first person to tell you I don't like guys, using performance enhancing drugs. Now again. Before it was against regulation, I didn't care. I look at it and say, hey, if they can take it and they want to take it, that's their business. But once it becomes against regulation, now I sit there and say, hey, you can't do it. It's against the rules. It's not against the law per se, because there can be a doctor that can prescribe it to you, but it's against the rules. And it's the same thing with marijuana. But people are more okay with the marijuana, and I'm okay with the marijuana, but it's against the rules. And this is not about the governance of the people. This is about the governance of a sport. And it's not about people's freedoms and rights. When you decide to apply for the license, you're agreeing to abide by whatever state's, legislation and regulations there is towards the sport. If you don't like their regulation, you don't like their legislation towards the sport, don't apply for the license there. And that's where you as a fighter have to start making stands and saying, hey, you know what? I'm not going to just sit here and do something with the rules they have because I don't agree with them. Okay, that's being a smart human being. But don't sit there and say I don't like it and then sign on the dotted line and say it's not fair when you signed for it. Don't sit there and complain about it. You knew what the rules were. And if when in the end, if people are never going to, look at everything. They're going to look at their side. But if someone, likes me, awesome. If they don't like me, awesome. I don't care.
This past Saturday in San Jose, California, during Bellator Dynamite, the announcement was made that former Pride heavyweight champion Fedor Emelianenko will be making his return to MMA when he fights in Japan on New Year's Eve. As big as this story is, John, to me, the much, much bigger story is that Emelianenko will be fighting for a brand new MMA promotion created by former Pride FC president Nobuyuki Sakakibara.
Well, you know what? It's I hate to say things, because I've known about this for quite a while. when the whole thing with Fedor coming out and, he's coming back. And, I knew the UFC was trying to sign him, and I'm like, that ain't going to happen, But, I can't sit there and tell people. It's none of my business as far as telling people. I've talked to him. I've talked to other people, and I know what he's going to do. And I knew he was going to fight in Japan. And, it's just a matter of when they decide to bring out that information, then I'll talk about, he's going to be fighting in Japan. That's where he belongs in a certain way, because that's where he made his career. They love him there. He's got a godlike status there. You got to look, for, him being here and what he's done. The people in North America love him. They're crazy about him. But his real dominance and all the great wins that he had were all in Japan, and they still have this affinity for him that, they believe in his abilities. They believe in what he can do. It's the right place for him to fight. We don't know who he's going to fight. That's the question. But him going back with Saki Kibara, who, he helped make Pride, they helped make him. It's a good fit.
John, you just hit on it. Who does he fight? Because if you look at the landscape of MMA, all the fighters under contract to the UFC, to Bellator, to World Series of Fighting, and to one championship, I don't know the exact number. I think that's got to be around 900, I would say. I think that's a fair estimation, 900 contracted fighters. So there aren't a lot of free agents out there who either are not complete unknowns or fighters that are well past their best. That, I think, is a big issue. Who does Fedor Emelianenko fight? Perhaps he fights somebody off of the Bellator heavyweight roster, which I don't mean to have sour grapes because I'm no longer Bellator. It's never been the strong point of the promotion.
No, it's not the strong point of the promotion. But you got to figure, because of the arrangement that is obviously there between Saki Kibara and Spike TV and Bellator, that entire lineup is open as a possibility for him being able to fight anybody on it. You've got all kinds of guys in Japan who are still looked at as big time fighters there. Some of them are getting up in age and might be a little bit past where they should be, but you got guys like Ishii that's out there, and there's guys for him to fight. It's not going to be the guys that have the weight behind their name like the top guys in the UFC. That's just not going to be there for him. But again, maybe that's not exactly what he needs either, and that's not what's good for Saki Kibara and his new promotion. It's to allow him to come out there, allow him to fight someone that is a good fighter, but not some guy that is probably better than him at this point, that is going to take away that ability for him to possibly win the fight. So they're going to put him up against someone that is good for Japan. That's where the fight is going on. And with the fight taking place in Japan, you know what? I would really, be surprised if it wasn't against, someone that the Japanese people are familiar with.
So I'm going to give a bit of a preamble here. So I'm not taken out of context. I'm making news on the MMA websites this upcoming week after the program airs. I'll say that Fedor Emelianenko is one of the nicest, kindest people I've ever met in my life, not just in fighting, but in my life. I'm a huge Fedor Emelianenko fan. I was a huge fan before I met him. I got to know him. He lived up and exceeded the expectations. I'll also say that for me, he is the greatest fighter in the history of MMA, but I have to judge that by the era. It's like when the NFL always puts the greatest list, and they'll have some offensive lineman from pre-World War II, and the guy is like 6'1" and 185 pounds. He may have been the greatest offensive lineman for that era, maybe the greatest ever, but it doesn't mean he could play at that size now. So with all of that said, my real respect and admiration for Fedor Emelianenko, here's the reality. He's listed at 5'11 and a half. I've stood next to him many times. I think he's about 5'9". He spent most of his career fighting at about 230 pounds. On the date of this New Year's Eve show in Japan, he'll be 39 years old. I just think that heavyweight MMA fighting has moved on. Even though we're only talking a few years ago, relatively speaking, since he was dominating, I think the sport moves so fastly, I don't know if he can be relevant anymore. He can be relevant as an attraction, but as a legitimate top fighter in MMA at the heavyweight division, I'm not sure that I see it, John.
Well, you're right. Time moves on, and time stands still for no man. And Father Time is the only one that's undefeated. And that's all those things that you can say that are all true. People, all the time bring up, how do you think, so-and-so would have done today? It's like, not well.
Well, we
What do
talked
you
about
want,
Rocky. We talked about Rocky Marciano on the program last week, and you made the great point. Rocky Marciano was the heavyweight world champion, undefeated, 49-0. He weighed 185 pounds. Let's be serious. I mean, he'd be fighting Steve Cunningham now or Antonio Tarver. It's era to era, and in boxing, a different era is the 1950s, and MMA, a different era is like 6 years ago.
Absolutely, and you look at it's people get this concept that what this guy he was killing people back then. That's because he was just that much better than everyone back then. But now everybody is at least that plus against him now. I know that's a weird statement to say, but it's the truth. Evolution, things change. You can't sit there and compare guys, usually from the past. There may be that one that is just so unique that he stands out, no matter what time. And, you can look at, there's a George St. Pierre's or a John Jones or somebody that good, a Demetrius Johnson, the way he's going through all the flyweights. There are those guys that, you can look and say, maybe somewhere down the road, you can still compare him to what is going to be the future. But the future, especially in our sport, is evolving so fast, and guys are getting so much better at everything. The techniques and just what they do overall in the ability to flow from one form to the next and the transitions. I had people sitting there, saying, "Oh, I think that the Tito Ortiz Liam McGeary fight was, that's a fake, it's fraud, it was work." And it's like, you're a moron.
Yes.
Okay. And they're like, Tito would never tap that fast. Tito's smart enough to tap when he knows, I just got screwed. I put myself in a bad spot and I'm going out. And so he taps. And, this is the evolution of the sport. You get guys like a Liam McGeary, who's 6'6", these long legs, is able, you watch what he does. When Tito would get on top of people, Tito used to crush people. All right, because, they would do certain things. Well, the sport has changed, and it's not about, I'm going to just put him in guard and hold on to him and let him break through that and crush me. It's now about, you see Liam bringing his legs up in certain ways and bringing his leg across, and Tito can't move it out. And all of a sudden, he's putting Tito in danger, and all of a sudden he's having to yank himself out from that, gets himself back to position. All of a sudden he's in danger again. That's the evolution of MMA, and this is it's a new game. And it's going to continue to be a new game for, in the 10-year cycle. There's going to be guys that 10 years ago, they were great, but they're not going to be able to compete with guys in this 10-year period. And that's going to continue for a while because our sport is evolving so much. And this is what's, happening or going to happen when you're looking at, Fedor. Fedor was a monster back when he was in Pride. He was crushing good fighters. His 3 fights, if you want to look at him, 2.5 fights against, Rodrigo Nogueira. Look at what happened in those fights. He crushed a really good fighter. He crushed Heath Herring, beat the hell out of Heath Herring, a really good fighter. He made the blueprint. Crow Cop at the time was destroying everybody, and Fedor absolutely wrote the blueprint on how to beat Crow Cop. He was the first guy that didn't back up from him, first guy that went after him and made him go backwards, and all of a sudden everyone realized, oh my God, he doesn't fight the same when he's going backwards. And he just had done so many really great things in the sport and had fought so many good fighters and just crushed them that he became, he was the king. And, kings only last for so long, and Fedor will only last for so long. But you really, the one thing I look at it, if you haven't seen him fight, man, this is your chance to watch him fight because he was special. And it's like watching an Anderson Silva. Anderson Silva is not going to be the champion anymore. That's not going to happen, but it's special to watch him fight.
John, as we broaden this on Fedor Emelianenko into former Pride FC Nobuyuki Sakakibara, who's now heading this new organization. Some media reports have said it's going to be called Samurai FC. What we do know for sure is that they're going to launch with a major card in Japan on New Year's Eve. Fedor Emelianenko is going to fight an unnamed opponent, presumably in the main event. So as you know, John, I think anybody who knows me, I tell them really the greatest honor of my career is that I was the final English language play-by-play commentator for Pride. I worked for Saki Kibara. I have full faith in him. I think he can make Japanese MMA truly great again. The question I have, can he broaden that to what he did with Pride? The last Pride event, April 2007, how much has our sport changed since then? It's amazing.
Well, the real question for me is, if you look at it, Pride was huge in Japan. The Japanese audience loved it. It was something that they took actual pride in. That was their promotion, and they followed it and supported it in a huge fashion. And when it died, I think part of, MMA in Japan died. And the question is, can he recoup that? Can he get it back? It's a real question of, is it, it's a different time in Japan. It's a different, it's many years past Pride, and he's going to end up, trying to bring back what he did and that magic that he had before. And, and I can tell you the promotion that they did, the production was just incredible. Those shows were they were an event. You look at Dynamite here that Bellator did, they did a great job, and it's a small size of what Pride was doing back in Japan. And it's really going to be the question, is the Japanese audience going to buy into it again, and are they going to end up, latching onto it like it's their own, like they did with the original Pride, whatever he's going to call it. That's what he's looking for. That's what his goal is going to be. That's what he needs to do to make it happen. He has the connections to, get this thing on TV in Japan. If you can't get it on normal TV in Japan, it's not going to survive. He's got those connections. He's got a lot of connections that are going to help make him successful. The real question is, can he get the Japanese people to follow and stand behind this new promotion like it's one of theirs, like it's their own, like they used to do with Pride?
Pride lasted 10 and a half years. They held 68 events. You think the UFC over the next 18 months will probably exceed 68 events. It's so different, too, in the fact of you have to have so much content now. Even Bellator is talking about adding shows. When I worked there under Bjorn Rebney, we were doing 25, 26 shows a year. It's down to 16. Scott Coker said they might be at 20 or 22. If Pride chugs along doing one show a quarter, or even if you look at that average, 6.8, basically 7 shows a year, I don't know that they can dominate again globally in MMA like they did if they're only doing 7 shows a year when there's just the absolute tonnage going on with the UFC. And then you throw in all the Bellator shows, and you throw in the World Series of Fighting. And if you have Access TV, and if you get UFC Fight Pass and you watch fights online from around the world like KSW or One Championship, that did not exist in 2006, 2007. It most definitely exists in our sport in 2015.
Yeah, and again, it's when you're looking at it, saying the numbers, obviously they're not going to be able to do that many fights in the beginning because just financially it's going to be tough. The amount of fighters that they're going to have under contract is not going to be that great, so it's hard to get fighters. They're going to come. You can again say, I think the whole Bellator lineup is going to possibly be open to them, so that'll help them out immensely in being able to go after some good fighters and get good fighters for their shows. People they're going to put on an entertaining fight for the people, but it's going to be it's a different task. It's a difficult task, but the real thing that they need to do is not worry about worldwide. They need to worry about the Japanese market. The Japanese market is huge when it comes to martial arts, and if they can catch that spark that Pride had, then they've got something, and then they can expand from there, and then you can start doing more shows. But if you sit there and you try to do, it's like, when Scott Coker took over Bellator, he cut down on the number of shows because it wasn't smart for the promotion. Don't try to compete with the UFC. The UFC is what it is. It's the big gorilla out there, and they can put on as many shows as they want, and they have the financial resources and the ability to have a bad show that they don't make money on, that they lose money on, and it's okay in the big scope because they need to get fighters fights for how many people they have under contract, and they can move on from there and then put on a show where they do make money. Well, when you're a brand new promotion, losing money is part of what's going to happen, and you got to be careful with how fast those losses come. You've got to be smart in how you do things to get people to start, tuning in and coming to the events. And the one thing, You look at the old Prides. The real difference, the old Prides were always about 50,000 people at the show, up to 91,000 when they did their first Dynamite show. And so you look at all of that, they had people coming to that show to support it. They had a live gate that was huge. They had huge TV contracts. Again, I'm sure Saki Kabara is going to be getting those TV contracts. That's the way he's going to be able to make this work. But he's going to have to put butts in the seats. He's going to have to get the Japanese people behind him.
If Saki Kabara can get his new promotion anywhere close to Pride levels, I think he's going to have to sign someone who's a big name, maybe even a champion from the UFC. It's one thing to get a 39-year-old legend like Fedor Emelianenko, or if you're going to go on the nostalgia tour, here comes back Bob Sapp. Oh, we're getting the Nogueira brothers back. We're getting Mirko Krokop back. But can they sign someone right now who is at or near the top in the UFC? Can they get them to break those contracts, jump over? That, to me, would be the tipping point if it can be global dominance. Or maybe to your point, John, all they should really focus on, let's just control Japanese MMA and see what happens from there. Slow build.
Well, you've got to start somewhere, and you've got to start with where you're going to be doing the shows. And Japan is where they're going to be doing the shows. But obviously their whole thing is going to be they're going to try to bring back a couple of the stars from the past. The real question for people is Vanderlei Silva. A lot of people are talking about, is Vanderlei going to be going over with Saki Kabara? He was huge with Saki Kabara, and he was huge in Japan. The real question is, he does have his suspension. Okay, that's minor. That's in Japan. It's not going to, there's nothing that, they're going to be able to do with that. But he does have a contract with the UFC, and the UFC will always try to enforce that contract that he has because they haven't released him. And he can go over and try to fight in Japan, but the courts in Japan can hold that up and can make it to where he can't fight. So there's a whole lot of different things to go off of. But for them to be successful, yes, they're going to have to find someone that's going to jump. They're going to jump over from the UFC's contract, and it's going to be tough to get a champion because there's so many stipulations as far as that fighter being able to leave, the promotion, because they have the first right of refusal. But again, if the money is too high, the UFC will pass on them because it's just one fighter, and that's the way that they start building their promotion in Japan.
John, final point for me on this. I think this is great. I really think this is great because, as we've said all the time, we're MMA fans, all levels, from the mom and pop Amis all the way to the UFC. We're MMA fans. This, to me, no matter how you spin it, is good for the sport of mixed martial arts.
It's good for the fighters. That's the one thing that I like about the whole thing. It gives the fighters another option, and options are great. Sometimes they're a pain in the butt because you don't know which one to take, but if you have options, it's good. It doesn't mean that you're always going to pick the right one, and that's what makes it frustrating for a fighter. But the more options that fighters have to be able to shop their wares around most money, because that's really what it comes down to. Who's going to be the best, for their brand? Because that's a lot of what this is the fighter has to look at this in a different, fashion than, the norm. Because if you're looking between Bellator and the UFC, those are two brands that are within the same market, the U.S. market. So you can look and say, well, I can look and say that, I'm going to be seen in both. I'm going to be seen in my home state in both. And that's, fine with me. It really doesn't matter to me which one I'm on. Okay. But when you go to Japan, you're basically saying that you don't care about your home, state seeing you, your friends seeing you. You don't care about really, building your brand here where you live. If it's in Brazil where you live, or in the U.S. or Canada, you care more about what you're making for that fight. You're making with a sponsorship that you can get, or possibly what they can do for you in Japan. Getting big in Japan is one thing. Getting big everywhere else is another. So fighters are going to have to look at the entire package. It's not only the pay, it's, the exposure and everything that's going to be there for you. But there's going to be fighters that are going to want to go fight. I don't know what the rule set's going to be for the new promotion there. Are they going to utilize the unified rules? Or are they going to sit there and go back to, more like pride-based rules? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. That also might be something that makes some fighters say, I want to go there, and some fighters say, I don't want to go there.
Still to come on this week's episode of Let's Get It On, John will answer your questions submitted via email, info@letsgetitonpodcast.com, and on Twitter by using the hashtag AskBJM. And we'll be speaking with Bobby Gunn, who's leading the resurgence of bare knuckle boxing. With Big John McCarthy, I'm Sean Wheelock, and you are listening to Let's Get It On. Join me on Saturday, October 3rd and Sunday, October 4th for the MMA Classic Fan Expo, which will take place in Syracuse, New York at the Center of Progress building. I'll be there to host a screening of the very first UFC with a question and answer session to follow, which will feature UFC creator and founder Art Davie and a first ever reunion of UFC 1 fighters, including Gerard Gordeau and Art Jimerson. Numerous MMA stars past and present will also be in attendance throughout the weekend, including Don Fry, Claudia Gadella, Mark Coleman, Joe Riggs, Butterbean, Matt Hamill, Carla Esparza, Gary Goodridge, and Felice Herrick. Plus, there will be an MMA celebrity roast of UFC Hall of Famer Dan Severn, as well as live MMA and grappling events. You can get autographs, purchase fight memorabilia and merchandise, and best of all, hang out and take pictures with some of the true greats of mixed martial arts. Tickets are available right now online at themmaclassic.com. Again, that's online at themmaclassic.com. October 3rd and 4th in Syracuse, New York for the MMA Classic Fan Expo. I'll see you there. Hey, this is Sean Wheelock.
And this is Big John McCarthy.
If you're a fan of our show, then you're going to love the rest of the Ignotainment podcast lineup.
Like the Ocho Man behind the 8 Ball and the Whiskey Philosopher with Jeff Cooper.
You can find these great podcasts and more at ignotainment.com. Thanks again and enjoy the rest of the program.
Let's get it on!
When looking for new and exciting clothing concepts, look no further than Lambs to Lions. Lambs to Lions has great designs that incorporates the past from boxing with the new and exciting evolution of MMA. We all start out as lambs, but with time, training, and hard work, we can all become lions. Be part of the Lambs to Lions movement and check out all of their great designs. You can get your Lambs to Lions gear at the Las Vegas Fight Shop or go to lambstolionsbrand.com.
Now, back to Let's Get It On with your hosts, Big John McCarthy and Sean Wheelock.
Every week on this podcast, Big John and I answer your questions, so ask away via email, info@letsgetitonpodcast.com, and now on Twitter by using the hashtag AskBJM. And of course, please, please, please include a pronunciation guide for your name. First up, Diego Torres, who John says he's your number one fan in Uruguay. He used the hashtag AskBJM to submit this question. John, who was the dirtiest fighter you have ever refed?
Oh, dirty fighter. Wow, that's tough. Yeah, when you sit there and say dirty fighter, it's I quantify fighters that what I call push the edge. And there's all kinds of them out there. But, wrestlers are the guys that if you're going to look and start to try to push the edge a lot, and a lot of them come from the wrestling world because they're used to that grind. They're used to using their head to manipulate and move people. They like to do things a certain way. Chael Sonnen used to be great at, using his head and getting people to get upset with what he was doing, even though what he was doing was legal. So, some people say he's a dirty fighter. He's not a dirty fighter. He's fighting under the rules. He understands what he can do. I don't look and say, someone is a dirty fighter as long as they're staying within the rules. I've had guys do things that I thought were dirty during the fight. It doesn't mean that I think that they are a dirty fighter per se. Always lose composure in fights. They get upset. They get frustrated. They can't do the things that they thought they were going to be able to do in the fight. And they tend to try to do something to create a situation that might even get them out of the fight. It's not the smartest, but I don't look at any individual as being the dirtiest fighter I ever, refereed. There's been guys that push the edge, but that's my job to bring it back to the cleaner side.
Next
Didn't
up,
answer that, did I? That's pretty bad.
No, it's quite all right. No, very fair point. Next up, Jay from Detroit. I just hope he's still your number one fan in Uruguay.
Yeah,
after
there
that.
went number one, and there will never be a number two.
So Jay in Detroit asked, John, I just watched Invicta 14, which, by the way, you were a referee on along with Mike England. I was there with my daughter Ellie, sitting cage side in Kansas City. Twice during the broadcast, commentator Julie Kedzie mentioned loose-fitting tops worn in the cage. I agree that they are dangerous and could aid in a choke or type of fighter's hand. Jay continues, John, how is this allowed?
Well, when it comes to the fighter uniform that's allowed for female fighting, it's a little bit, obviously it's different because they have tops on compared to a man. And they're allowed to wear things like, the sport bra look, the short thing that a lot of girls will wear, but they can wear a rash guard also. And the thing is, it doesn't have anything to say as far as the size of the rash guard. So it's something that would have to be actually looked at, by the Association of Boxing Committees, by our rules committee, as far as what that they were allowed to actually wear, as far as how loose fitting it is. We see a lot of times girls going in there with, almost like stretch pants going over their knee, and we'll sit there and we'll, cut them off. You see girls all the time with these. It looks like at the bottom it's raggedy looking. It's because they've been cut off because they had longer ones. We do things all the time, with girl fighters that are different than what we've done with men, because men at a certain point, everyone's pretty much become acclimated to what's legal and what's not. And women are kind of, they're always coming up with something new based upon their style and what they like to do, but the loose-fitting rash guard, there's really nothing that we can do at this time. As long as it's a rash guard material and it is not a T-shirt, they're allowed to wear it.
This question from Rod Parker. In light of the Explode Fight Series issues, do you think it would be beneficial for the major MMA promoters to have farm league type promotions, professional, amateur, or both, that they have formal agreements with? Would this be beneficial for fighters, or does the current setup of regional promotions feeding to the larger promotions work well enough as is? That's a really good, complex question.
Well, it is a good question, and there's different answers to it. Is because a lot of promotions have almost a feeder league to them. The UFC, you look at, they have certain promotions that they almost use as a feeder league. They use Invicta almost as a feeder league for their females. They use the RFA. The RFA is a great promotion, and if you're the champion in the RFA, you're almost in a position where you're going to be able to get that shot at going to the UFC. And to sit there and say that it's in, the actual promotion needs to set up basically the minor leagues, you're asking too much of them. Running one promotion is difficult enough. To run, multiples. The UFC was doing it, basically when they had, the WEC for a short time, when they had Strikeforce for a short time. And they ended up taking those and dismantling them because it's just not that easy to do the promotion and the marketing and everything of the fights for those smaller promotions. Yes, you have people doing it, but it always tends to cross over. And so the way that it's set up with regional promotions and the way we have it, it's a good system. It keeps things separated. It keeps it to where someone who is fighting in that regional promotion, when they get asked by the UFC to go to the UFC, they can go. If they get asked by Bellator, they can go. If they get asked by the World Series of Fighting, they have an option, and that's a good thing for the fighter. I like the option.
Remember, email us your questions, info@letsgetitonpodcast.com, and submit them on Twitter by using the hashtag AskBJM. We're now joined on Let's Get It On by Bobby Gunn, who was once one of the top cruiserweights in boxing and is now at the forefront of the move to bring back bare knuckle boxing, a version of the sport that has not been mainstream since the 1880s. Hey, Bobby, thanks for being on the program.
Thank you very much, boys. It means a lot to me. I'm over the moon.
Well, first up, Bobby, I want to tell you that, like John, I'm a real student of boxing history, and I love this renaissance of bare-knuckle boxing and the London prize ring rules, so full credit to you, my friend.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you so much. It means a lot.
Hey, Bobby. Bobby, this is
John.
How's it going, stud? How you doing?
I'm doing real good. I'm just going to say, London prize fight rules originally was a form of grappling. The John L. Sullivan, all those fights, there was grappling. What we do is basically it's regular. It's like boxing, but it's bare knuckle boxing, and it's been around, in this country for, oh my God, over 100 years. It's like the movie Hard Times with Charles Bronson. They were fighting in the docks, they're having a hard times in the economy, and the people will go and fight. And the underground world, I call it, was always here. And I was a champion for 11 years. I beat everybody they put in front of me in underground bare knuckle boxing. And August the 5th, 2011, I fought in the first legitimate sanctioned bare knuckle fight in over 123 years. And God rest his soul, Burt Randolph Sugar called me on the phone. He's one of the best boxing historians in the world. He said to me, because you're fighting in a sanctioned event, this is for the linear bare knuckle heavyweight title. I said, how is that? He says, it's because it is. Because it's the only sanctioned event. His last one was John O'Sullivan. And I beat a real bare knuckle fighter who's also a pro fighter, too. And I beat him in the third round. And then the boys kind of went crazy. The boxing world come against me real hard because they don't want any competition. And to tell you the truth, the only support I've really got has been from the MMA world. And I know it sounds crazy, but that's the God's truth.
Bobby, let's talk about your boxing career just a little bit, because you started back in like 1989 as a professional boxer, and you had, a lot of fights, going up to the point where you won the, I think it was the WBC cruiserweight title, right?
I fought 5 times for the world title. I won the IBA World Cruiserweight title in 2006. I won a WBC America's title, a WBA title. I had a great run. I turned pro when I was 16 years old. I lied my age. I said I was 18. I come to this country from Canada because my mom was American, and she was, God love her, she passed away with cancer, and she was battling cancer. And because she was American citizen, even though she's married to my father, but she never done her paperwork the right way, and the Canadian government wouldn't help her medically. So we had to come over to America, and we tried our hardest. I got her the best I could do. She was a champion. She fought the hardest battle. But at that time, when I was young, I actually signed with Don King Productions, and used to hang around Mike Tyson and Julio Cesar Chavez. And I've run the fight game all my life, and a lot of times people look at my record, I had 30 pro fights, they'll say inactive. But at that time, inactive, I really wasn't active. That's when I just went full into the underground bare knuckle world. You know what I mean? And I had about over 70 fights there now in bare knuckle. I never lost bare knuckles. I had a good run.
Here's the question. I mean, you ended up in the boxing world. You fought guys, that everyone knows: James Toney, Glenn Johnson, Thomas Adamczak. I mean, you fought some great guys. Enzo. What drew you into? I'm going to start trying this bare knuckles.
Well, to be honest with you, John, it's okay. I said this before. There's all dogs have the same DNA. They all have the same blood, right? But there's different breeds of dogs. There's Chihuahuas, Poodles, and there's Pit Bull dogs. My breed of people I come from are like the Pit Bull dogs. We're just born into it. All my culture, my family, fighting was just rich. My grandfather, my father before me, my uncles, they're all fighters. And we're a rich bloodline of bare knuckle boxing. And if I didn't do it, I was the oddball. So I was always a part of my life, even when I was a little boy, fighting bare knuckles. And then, to be honest with you, we did it our way. But when I got into the circuit, where I seen the underground circuit, they call it, it's like from New York to California, I fought every race, every caliber fighter you can imagine from different countries. And it's funny, and a lot of those underground events, I've seen politicians, judges, police officers. I know people laugh at you. I see mafia characters. I see fellas who are like Unusual Suspects in the movie. It's a array of characters you can't believe. But you know something, boys? Everybody was there to watch a fight. And the one thing I like about bare knuckle boxing, and people don't understand, is I've been in fights. Even Teddy Atlas said I should be the controversy boy. I'm the poster boy for controversy, because I've been in fights where they stop the little cut in your nose, and it's horseshit. I mean, a champion warrior should go out in the shield. A man trained for a fight, let him fight. In bare knuckle boxing, I've never seen no injuries, and I've never seen no dirty corruption. The referee always gives fair play. They call him a fair play man. He lets the fighters fight, and that's the difference. There's no corruption in bare knuckle boxing. And that's why, as a sport, we're taking it mainstream. And I'm telling you, boys, a lot of people don't understand. It's going to be I'm not going to say it's going to be as big as boxing MMA, but it's going to be out there, and the people are going to like it because I'm going to make sure that it's a fair deal shake for all the fighters involved.
Bobby, well, let's talk about you taking this mainstream, because there's literally always been underground fighting. You hear it called warehouse fighting or parking lot fighting. My wife is English, and she's told me about, I don't think she actually went in her nice middle-class upbringing, but it's pretty well known in England. People, politically correct, they're called travelers. There's a non-politically correct term my wife taught me that I don't think is appropriate to use, but there's a culture of that, just literally bare-knuckle boxing in parking lots. But
that's
to take it main...
That's all my people I come from, pal. You're talking to the guy should be snatched from the Blue Black Fit. That's me, my boys. I'm a traveler. I'm a gypsy boy. And I come up that way. That's what I mean. It's in my culture.
So to take this mainstream then, to get out of the parking lots, to get out of the basements, to get out of the gyms and the warehouses, what does that entail? John and I obviously are huge in regulation, but are you going to the states? I know your sanctioned fight was on a tribal reservation in the state of Arizona. So what are the steps that you're taking right now, Bobby?
Well, you got to understand something real quick. When I fought was at Fort McDowell Casino in Arizona, Scottsdale. And in that casino that probably had 100 professional fights, they also have their own boxing commission, the Navajo Boxing Commission, and that's who sanctioned that bare knuckle fight. And because it was sanctioned, that's why the Bare Knuckle Boxing Hall of Fame recognized me. I'm inducted in the Hall of Fame this year, early August the 1st, as the only linear world champion because of that. It was sanctioned. Now, yes, there's fights that happen, like you said, all these back roads, and yes, but any fight that I've ever been in, there's always been medical, doctors there, and there's always been an ambulance close by, and that's the most important thing. And what I'm trying to do is to explain to everybody in the world, I want to make this a safer environment. Not, you understand, because it's going to happen, and it's kind of going crazy right now. I mean, I'm more known for bare knuckle boxing than all the things I won and fought all the champions of boxing. Nobody even talks about that anymore. It's like it didn't exist, boys. You know what I mean? It says bare knuckle boxing. And to be honest with you, I want to make this, boys, I'm going to make this, I'm not going to be like the Outlaws. I'm the pioneer of this. But when I say bare knuckle boxing, I mean bare knuckle. I don't mean all these bandages and hand wraps. There's a lot of groups, even in England, are coming up, popping up, Mickey Mouse groups, I call them, wearing bandages and hand wraps. And boys, that's more dangerous than a bare knuckle fight. You wrap a man's hand up, it's like a glove job, because that's like, it's dangerous. It's like hitting with a 4-ounce MMA gloves. The real traditional sport, doing it the right way, we've already, I can't say where, but there's a state that's already granted us. We're looking to have a major event at the end of November. And from there, boys, I hope it goes like a domino effect.
So is this something, Bobby, that you're looking to publicize, sell tickets, broadcast on television or the internet or even pay-per-view? Is it aspiring to be that big?
Absolutely it is. And the fight, bare knuckle boxing needs to be that big. And everybody knows I'm not beating around the bush to it. I spoke to him, and I spoke to his manager. He agreed to it. It's Kimbo Slice versus Bobby Gunn. That's a bare knuckle super fight that will take this sport, boys, to where I want to go. It'll shed a light on it where everybody in the world will know. Is he the best fighter in the world? No. Is he the best? But no. But he's a lightning rod for attention. Everybody knows Kimbo Slice. And I think it'll be a great fight.
So you think that you're going to be able to sign a contract to get Kimbo to fight you in a bare knuckle fight?
Well, he Big John, I see Mike Lambert, his manager. He told me 100% he agrees to it. He's on for it. This is me talking personally. And we have to get a few more details done. And he said he would do it. But again, talking, so we hope he stands up to his word. And I believe in my heart he will, because, John, I tortured that man. I've chased that man for 7 years. I'm like, remember Robert De Niro, the fan, in the soccer? That's what I've heard of, okay? And I hope he does, because I'll be honest with you, it's what the sport needs to give it a mainstream light. You shine a light on a pay-per-view, bare knuckle super fight, it'll go big, boys, it'll draw a lot of attention.
Here's one of the things I want to talk to you about, Bobby. Back when MMA first started, one of the things that everyone looked at was the bare knuckle aspect to the average person, especially to the politician. They look at that like it's bad. It's barbaric. When I would sit there and I would tell them, it's much harder to land effective blows with a bare hand because you got to be selective in what you do. A glove is not put on the hand to protect the face. It's the hand. I want you to put this glove on. I want you to hit that table as hard as you can, right? And they'd sit there and they'd give it a whack. I said, I want you to take it off, hit it just as hard. And they're like, well, I'll hurt my hand. Exactly. You've got to be selective. So what are you doing to try to, inform people about the difference between gloves? Because you have fought with gloves for a long time, and now you fought a lot of fights with bare knuckles, and you have to fight differently. How are you educating people to get them to understand that bare knuckles is not exactly what they're thinking?
Well, the truth is, anybody that wants to look into it, and I guess I say Google. Google's everything now, right? Google's for everything. There's never been a death in bare knuckle boxing in the history. Never has. Boys, me personally, I've seen, oh my God, maybe 500 bare knuckle fights in my life. And all I ever seen was a cut eye, a little bloody nose, a busted up lip. But I've seen professional fighters walking on their heels punch drunk. 10 years later, it's heartbreaking. World champions. And I don't see that in bare knuckle world. And again, boxing, I say, is checkers. Bare knuckle is chess player. It's a little slower pace, but you pick your shots. When I'm fighting bare knuckle, I go to the body more. I'm going to aim for a shot. I'm going to aim right at your eyebrow, right to your nose. I'm not going to go below your nose because I'll cut my on your teeth. I'll cut my hand. I'm not going to go above your eyebrow and your forehead because I'll shatter my hand. It's a sport that's more science. Like, you got to really know pick your shots. It's a little slower pace. And the truth is, I would tell the world, my God, I've had over 70 bare knuckle fights. I'm a rat and raving lunatic, but I'm not punchy, okay? And I'm the proof in the pudding that it's a safer sport. And I can show you a ton of bare knuckle fighters that you would never know it, John. You would never know it. And God forgive me again, I can show you pro fighters. I don't want to mention any names. My God, brother, you can't hardly spell their name now.
Bobby, I think you and Big John have hit on something, because to the outsider, the non-combat sports person, they think it's barbaric. But I'll tell you, as a kid, all the way through high school, every year my dad would take me to Memorial Hall in Kansas City, Kansas for Tough Man. So these are people who didn't really know how to fight, but they're wearing 20-ounce gloves. I have never seen before or since, and I've commentated over 2,000 MMA bouts around the world, beatings like that, in those 20-ounce gloves, horrible beatings. As I was watching your fights online, you hit on it, Bobby. It's tactical. You're extending your jab. You're working to the body. You're working to the clinch, landing a big shot. You're not swinging and winging. So I'm from the perspective that this is a lot safer than putting people in 18-ounce gloves or 20-ounce gloves. And to your point, you see why you're not getting the traumatic brain injuries, because it's tactical. It's the one big strike. It's not the repetitive blows to the head, even in 8-ounce gloves that you're seeing.
Big John said it best. If a fighter is going to worry more about breaking his hand, than actually anything else. So that's why you don't throw crazy. And what you just said, though, them tough man fights. Again, in bare knuckle boxing underground, you never see these fights mismatched really bad. Because, again, if you get some idiot thinks you're a tough guy, and he goes to a bar and he's throwing darts, and his pastime is drinking pints, and he thinks he can fight, that's the kind of guy that can get hurt, against a real fighter. And I never really seen these fights like we're saying, like the tough man con. Yeah, that's dangerous. But the bare knuckle fighters were more picked, more better, and I never seen anybody get hurt bad, boys. Please believe me, I'm telling you, it's a lot more safer environment. And eventually, it's going to take a big showing to show the world. The world needs to see Bobby Gunn fight Kimbo Slice, and then look at it afterwards and say, something, that really wasn't that bad, but it was entertaining, but it wasn't that bad. That's what it needs.
Well, I'd be one of the guys that was absolutely sitting there watching it. If that comes out, I will watch you and Kimbo get after it, because it would be entertaining for me to watch.
Big John, I wish to God to be my prayer that you could be the referee. Oh my God, there's nothing better.
Maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll do that.
The truth is, Big John can beat the piss out of both of us, okay?
No.
I hugged him so I saw him. No, John, you're hard as a rock, brother. Honest to God, you are.
Bobby, I want to pick up on something that you mentioned earlier, that you've had a lot of resistance from the traditional boxing world. I co-wrote the book with Art Davie, the man who founded the UFC. And probably the most eye-opening thing for me in researching and writing the book with Art Davie was how the fight world was against him. It wasn't the people who didn't like fighting who were against the first Ultimate Fighting Championship. It was the people, and John knows this, he was there from the beginning. It was people from the traditional martial arts, the fight world, who said this is the worst idea. Seems like it's the same reluctance that you're getting, and I don't know if it's because it's new or if it's different, or if it just goes back to people feel financially threatened by what you're trying to do.
Well, again, the Big John was in this from the beginning, and he's seen everything and knows it all. And Art Davie's a total class act. I would say this here. The reason why the boxing world don't like it so much is in the ABC, I would say, is because they figure it's a threat, and financially their finger is not in the pie. And I'm just being honest with you. And that's a problem here. They think it's going to be a moneymaker, and they can't have their hooks involved into it. See, this is what's ruined boxing, boys, is all these championship titles, and it's watered it down. And, and that's what I like about bare knuckle boxing. There's only one champion. And that's me. And to be the man, you got to beat the man. And that's why I said there's a lot of Mickey Mouse organizations out there trying to create bare knuckle boxing in Europe and that. They can manufacture their own titles because they don't want to fight a real fighter like me. And the truth is, that's what's ruining the sport. That's why we have nothing to do with them. Yes, is this a hard road? Yes, it is. There's a lot of hurdles to jump. But we're not willing to work with the boxing in the ABC because, truthfully, boys, we don't have to. There is really no law against two men consistent going in and having a bare knuckle fight. Did you know that, boys? There's really no law against that. They'll tell you there's a law. This is not a street fight. This is not a barroom fight. This is two men. They get grown men. They get sign to do it, and
because they're willing participants.
Participants willing to do it, sign and agree to it, and like I said, we have attorneys, a team of attorneys. Boys, we have battled. I've stood before 5 state boxing commissions and battled this out with them. Honest to God, each one of them, we agree with you. Well, unfortunately, we can't do it right now, but we agree with you. And like I said, I can't mention the name, but said, okay, I'm going to do it. They agreed to it. Hopefully, at the end of November, we're going to have a massive show. But boys, believe me, when I won the sanctioned title, the ABC and Attorney General tortured me, and I had to hire an attorney. All because the truth was because the ABC's finger wasn't in the pie. They want a part of it. You understand it? Because the Native American Boxing Commission, they sanctioned and not work with the regular state. And yes, it's this, it's that, but the truth is, boys, it's here. Think about it. It's here. There's never been more talk about bare knuckle boxing. Even like, yes, it was original, the great fighter, God knows all of them, but think about it, boys. For the last 3 years, I broke my ass to get it out there, and it's getting out there, and it's not going to stop. I'm going to make it my heart desire to make this a mainstream sport.
Bobby, last thing for you. If you pull off this fight with Kimbo Slice, and I agree, I mean, I commentated for Bellator, Kimbo Slice versus Ken Shamrock did 1.6 million viewers. Huge number. So Kimbo Slice, I think, is definitely the opponent that you want to push this into the mainstream, into the public consciousness. Bobby, how big then do you think this can get? Do you think this is going to be a subset of combat sports, a subset of boxing, or do you think this could be like MMA where it takes off in its own direction?
Boys, I would tell you, what I'm telling you, I don't tell like fibs, I tell the truth here. Now, I'm going to tell you something. Anything I'm about to tell you, you can look it up. When I fought that fight August the 5th, 2011, that was on a small internet pay-per-view. It was called Ustream. You can Google look up. There's over 1 million pay-per-views. And that fight was not promoted the right way. And I fought a no-name, basically. Just take it from there. Could you imagine the views the Kimbo Slice, Bobby Gunn, bare knuckle super fight will be?
Bobby, the one thing that the bare knuckle has going for it, it's got you. And you are a great personality. You're a great fighter. And you are the guy that, if I think this is going to happen, it needs someone that has passion for it. And you have passion for it, and that's impressive. And you know what? Just keep doing what you're doing.
And Big John, thank you so much. And I just want to say for the record, the only fighter in boxing that I would fight, I would come out of retirement for, is one man only. It's Roy Jones Jr. And the world knows the first fight he pulled out 10 days before the fight. I just want to let everybody know that if you ask me if I'm boxing all the time, that's the only fight in boxing I would do would be him.
Not
so I hope you listen to one.
Bobby, great stuff. Thanks very much for being on our program.
Big John, thank you, Sean. Thank you, Big John. I love you guys. Thank you so much. I'm over the moon. Thank you so much.
That's Bobby Gunn, the recognized world heavyweight champion of bare knuckle boxing, who's leading the charge to bring this version of the sport back to the mainstream. John, Bobby said a lot of really interesting things. I think he said a lot of really intelligent things, and I think it's pretty clear you and me are fans of this type of combat sports.
Yeah, I mean, I would be a hypocrite if I sat here and said, bare knuckle boxing is bad. For years, I was telling people when we had MMA with no gloves, and part of the biggest problem was people looked at it. Uneducated people think that the glove is there for safety of the fighter. And it's the only thing it's there as far as a safety measure is to protect their hand. It does not protect the head. They're able to throw more punches and harder punches in a variety of different ways that they normally couldn't do with a bare hand because they're going to break their hand. So that glove is there to protect their hand, not their opponent's head. Now, the one thing that bare knuckles will do, you'll get more cuts. You know, if you get a guy that gets hit and he gets hit with in a spot, near his eye, it usually is going to cut him. So that's what people look at. They think that's terrible. It's bloody. Oh my God. That's not a serious injury. It's a cut. It's a laceration. So the whole concept, I don't know if it's going to take off or not, because it is a real difference from boxing. In boxing, you can throw a lot of different combinations. You go after people in a lot of different ways because of the fact that your hand is protected. And in bare knuckle boxing, it's a much slower pace. It's much more calculated, much more tactical in what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. There is a lot more body punching going on. They are selective when they go to the head because they cannot just sit there and freely punch at someone's head because they're going to ruin their weapon, which is either the left hand or right hand, and they can't continue on in the fight.
Every week here on Let's Get It On, we bring you our poll question. You can cast your vote on our website, letsgetitonpodcast.com. This week's poll question, are you interested in watching sanctioned professional bare knuckle boxing? Vote yes or no on our website. Let your voice be heard. Letsgetitonpodcast.com. John, I think the timing is perfect for this. Again, at the top of our interview with Bobby Gunn, I said bare knuckle boxing has not been mainstream since the 1880s. We really saw the emergence of the Marquess of Queensberry rules, which was gloved fighting starting in the 1890s. It's not as though one ended and the other began. There was an overlap period, but the 1880s was really the end of that bare knuckle era. Because there is so much disenchantment with boxing right now amongst even hardcore fans, and I think there are so many combat sports fans under the age of 20 who think that boxing is boring and limited. I think that there right now is that gap to come in and capture a lot of people, just like what our Davey did in 1993 with the first UFC. It's a niche in the market, and you're going to find that niche. And I don't mean this in a bad term. I mean this in a positive term. Exploit that niche.
Yeah, it is. And then, when you look at it, Bobby saying he wants, to fight Kimbo, you can't ask for a more perfect opponent for him as far as to get people's eyes on it and get them to get engaged with, if that fight's going to happen, because Kimbo came up with basically bare knuckles in the backyard. Sometimes his opponents weren't that good, but it was the way he fought and that rawness to it that caught everyone's attention and made it popular. And if you're going to go against anyone, go against a guy that has a popularity about him. He's a known, bare knuckle fighter, if you want to go with it, and has done it many times, understands it. And, that's the perfect guy for Bobby to go up against. I couldn't think of a better opponent.
I agree with you. And I think this hits on pay-per-view, which Bobby Gunn was alluding to. I think you're going to see a rise in people liking this. And just my opinion, tell me if you agree, John, I think more MMA fans are going to gravitate to this than so-called boxing purists, traditional boxing fans.
Yeah, I don't think the boxing purists are going to like it much. It's just, it goes against what is their norm. And it's not that, it's boxing, but their norm is, what they have, been watching since they were young and up into the point of, their older age, whatever they are, they're used to guys having gloves on. That's what they think is the professional and sporting way of doing it. They're not going to like the bare knuckle aspect, and that's okay. There's people that like clam chowder soup, and there's people that hate it, and that's it's just the way it is. And not everyone's going to like everything, but as long as it's done with regulation and sanctioning, it should be done in the same fashion that other sports are done, as far as combat sports, kickboxing, MMA, boxing, all of it. It's just a different form of boxing. You're not going to get all the different boxers to switch over to it. There's a lot of guys that say, no, I'm not going to do that. It does take a specific type of fighter to be good at it. And, it's just a different branch of the combative sports. And if it ends up catching on, I'm all for it.
John, final point on this. Just examine MMA for a moment. You can throw elbows. There's no protective gear on the elbows.
Glove.
You can throw kicks, right? You can throw knees. So if you look at it in those terms, it's not that outrageous then that you don't have protective gear, you don't have a glove on your fist, if you don't have those on your knees, on your feet, on your shins, or on your elbows.
Yeah, and but it's how long has it taken for people to get used to the fact that MMA fighters hit with elbows? We still get people, I don't like elbows. They cause cuts, and it's, there is no padding on it. It is an effective tool when you're fighting. It does sometimes cause cuts, not all the time, but we had to, it took years for people to get used to things, and it's going to take years for people to get used to, a bare knuckle boxing in this form, but as long as it has, again, the sanctioning that we're talking about, the regulation is the states, having, assurances and having things set up for the safety of the fighters. They have the proper ringside physicians. They have proper officials. They have, evacuation plans, and they have medical systems set up in case there's that problem. That's what, is important. They have fighters that are getting medical, so they're not going into something that is going to cause them, possibility of, having a problem during the fight. All this is stuff, if they do that, there's nothing, the bare knuckle aspect is minor, and it really is, the fighters take less damage. That's the whole key to this. We talk about, traumatic brain injury and everything, and you're not going to get the traumatic brain injury in bare knuckle boxing. You're going to get it with regular boxing because of the glove allowing the fighter to strike hundreds of times to the head without any repercussion to their hand.
We're back with you next week for a new episode of Let's Get It On, first available on Friday. Download and subscribe to our podcast on the iTunes Store. For Android, download the Stitcher app and subscribe. And you can go straight to our website, letsgetitonpodcast.com. You can also find us on social media, facebook.com/letsgetitonpodcast, and on Twitter @PodcastMMA for this show, and for us personally, @JohnMcCarthyMMA and @Sean Wheelock. To ask us a question, make a comment, or inquire about becoming a sponsor of Let's Get It On, email us at info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. Again, that's info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. For Big John McCarthy, Bobby Gunn, producer Chris Lakin, and our entire crew, I'm Sean Wheelock. Thanks for listening, everyone. This has been a presentation of Ignotainment Media Network, online at ignotainment.com.
Let's Get It On with Big John McCarthy and Sean Wheelock, only on the Ignotainment Media Network. Don't forget to leave a rating and review in the comments section of the iTunes Podcast Store. If you have questions, comments, or are interested in sponsoring the show, contact us at info@letsgetitonpodcast.com, or check out our additional lineup of podcasts, including Ocho Man, Behind the Eight Ball, The Whiskey Philosopher, and Youth Baseball Talk at ignotainment.com.